I want to address a series of issues. And I want to start with a framing that says that a lot of the non-urban mines, plantations, also has today an urban moment. So the city is not simply urban. I also think that a key factor explaining that is that when globalization takes off, when privatization and deregulation are implemented, a lot of what was in the hands of the national state, the legislature, etc., shifts. It doesn't disappear. It becomes private, and it actually situates itself in cities. So when we think about the city today, there is a lot of the non-urban that takes place there. So let me start by giving you my definition of the city, which is that the city is a complex but incomplete condition, entity. Now, complex means enormous variabilities. Incomplete means that it can never be fully finished, it can never be fully controlled. If it's fully controlled, it's not a city. And that's the problem with these huge private mega projects. They are fully controlled. That's not urban. So the city is a place where those without power also get to make a history, get to make a culture, get to make an economy, even if it is a neighborhood economy. That is something, those three things are something they cannot do, those without power cannot do in a private corporate office complex. They can go work and clean there or do whatever, but they cannot make a history, they cannot make a culture, and they cannot make an economy. Second element of a definition. If you take a city like New York, London, I don't dare to speak about Sao Paulo because I am in Sao Paulo with experts here, but Sao Paulo probably also fits this image. And you look at all the big, enormously powerful banks, enterprises, etc., that have existed, starting 300 years ago, 400 years ago. They're mostly dead. They don't exist anymore. Forms of urban government, forms of power, forms of controlling the city. Kings, queens, princes, I don't know what all. Dead, finished. But what still exists is some version of the city and its neighborhoods. And by neighborhoods, I mean modest localities. That is important. So if we define the urban in these very particular terms, so that not all densities are urban, then we can develop projects. When there is a conflict, if you can meet and debate, you learn, you advance, rather than just simply shrinking away. I mean, that kind of intelligence, and this is something that a working city makes its residents sort of smart. It's a kind of an intelligent way of handling, negotiating all these different things. Now, there are several trends that are happening today. Some are good, some are bad. I already mentioned some of the bad ones. The expansion of mega projects that are private, privately controlled, etc. An element that I want to develop with some detail is the question of the buying of properties, urban properties, that has taken off very, very strongly. Last year, over $1 trillion globally went to buy, just simply to buy existing property in the top 100 cities in the world. We have never seen it at this scale. Singapore bought a big piece of destroyed Detroit. Quietly, we know it because they had to sign a contract. They didn't announce it. What does that mean? What is happening? So I want to really dwell with some detail into those kinds of issues. And secondly, if something that has to do with finance, but I want to focus on a particular aspect, which is how the financializing of buildings is producing rapid, brutal outcomes. We need to address that. Sao Paulo is also beginning to, I know I have the data, is in those top 100 cities. And in some cities it has become extreme. Now I want to show some slides. And this is a financial instrument called the subprime mortgage. And that instrument, by the way, is traveling. It's not just the US. It was sold as a mortgage. People were told, mostly modest people, don't worry, you don't have to pay anything for 5 or 6 years. Just sign. The agents that were deployed to get those signatures had to, for the model to work, get 500 signatures a week. Over 15 million contracts were generated in the United States in about 7 years. Today, the data are there from our central bank. Over 14 million of those households have lost their home. They're out. And sort of they have lost everything, basically. Now, so you just get a picture. So you have an extraordinary superstructure to develop an instrument that makes modest, poorish people sign. And you have extracted the value. That also, of course, helped in the crisis. Now, I want you to invite you to think 14 million plus homes, households. That is about 30 million people, 40 million people. We're talking masses. In their full materiality, they're invisible. One way of thinking about this is suddenly a dense big city like New York has a lot of empty space. Then comes another history. That is, I'm talking to you about today's urban histories that are not very visible. So in New York and London, we have a housing crisis. Not because there are not a lot of apartments, luxury apartments, mostly empty, but because the pricing is very, very high, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know how that works out in Sao Paulo, but I know that a lot of cities are having a modest housing crisis. If you cannot house your firemen and women, firewomen, your police, your teachers, your nurses inside the city, and they have to travel 2 hours from the home to the work site, you are in trouble. In New York, our municipal government has to pay extra money to each policeman and each fireman in order that they can live close, at least, to the center of Manhattan, to the center of New York. This is something that is happening. Same thing in London. This is something that is happening. We, the people, are subsidizing our government to pay, which means subsidizing the big corporate investments, etc., that are just making it impossible for modest people to live there. This is a massive distortion of what a city is supposed to be. Why is that happening? Because right now, the best way to store your money is to buy property in a major city. This is a threat. This will kill the urbanity, if you want, of cities. My concern is that the brilliant and extremely creative lawyers and accountants that the big buyers can deploy, that they are in fact making a new kind of urban law, urban land law. They will be making the law, and that will be a commercial contract. And we lose something about, the integrity, the depth, and the complexity of territory, of land, including urban land. I hope that that was clear. I'm giving you sort of brief descriptions of new emergent processes that affect our cities, especially our big cities. So here's another thing that the Financial Times established this, and I sort of worked a bit with them on this, an invented luxury housing market that has about 25 cities in it. And it's marked by minimum prices. That's an invented price. That's an invented market. This is again another structure that is installing itself in our cities that you can't quite call democratic. Why does all of this matter? Well, because the city is one of the few spaces where those without power get to be actors, get to be makers. The city in its capacity to make us urban subjects. That is beautiful. That is not a gated community, which is just one kind of person. The city can actually hack, in the good sense of the word. The original meaning of hacking was unsettling the original design of something. So the city has a capacity to hack other systems. This that I've been describing to you, all this buying of property, it's losing that battle. The city cannot hack that. If the innards, if you want, the entrañas of a city are being bought up, stand empty, or are these privatized domains where it looks urban, but it's not really urban, we're in trouble. What we're confronting today, in an epoch that really begins in the West in the 1980s, privatization, deregulation, is logics of extraction. It's not buying to make a great neighborhood. It's not buying to provide housing. It's buying to own, and then let's see how we can use it, to extract some sort of something. Finance is also actually a logic of extraction. It's radically different from traditional banking. The traditional bank sells something it has, money. Finance sells something it does not have, and there lies its danger. It has to develop instruments to invade other sectors. And here are some of the effects. This is the United States. So this is about corporate profit. So what you have is that the crises worked to re-enable finance to again go up. And if you look at this one, it's even more remarkable. This is assets. Here it goes up, up, up. Here is the crisis, which here lasts about half an hour. It's right there. And then higher. Now, in the case of the United States, just to give you data, we have had millions of new jobs created. You have all heard about that. But if you look at what kinds of jobs, so with the crises, 65% of all jobs lost were middle-class jobs. After the crisis, the new jobs, only 22% are middle-class jobs. And those are deep systemic trends. That is happening a bit in many, many countries. This is not just the United States. I wanted to end on some positive notes about the city and urban space. And that is some of the trends that I see happening in different parts of the world. Urban space as a full, complex condition is under threat. I think we have to accept that. One element that is emerging in city after city is localities organizing themselves. One of the capabilities, one of the urban capabilities that I'm trying to bring up here is that you can actually make. And so the making of economies in cities, neighborhood economies, the relocalizing of whatever you can relocalize, extremely important. Final element, in Chicago, some people, and I participated a bit, started an academy for young people, a lot of minority people, who couldn't quite make high school, etc. And they were taught technical skills linked to the kind of technical skills that are needed in Chicago. And we graduated our first class a few years ago. Obama came to inaugurate our third class, and it worked. it's very local. They are trained for Chicago jobs. That is also something that our cities can do. I just want to leave you with that beautiful image, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.